Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. I am Sojourner Truth. As a former slave, I became an outspoken advocate for abolition and civil and women's rights in the 19th century. This is my story. I was born Isabella Bumfrey in 1797 to slave parents James and Elizabeth Bumfrey. My date of birth was not recorded, as was typical of children born into slavery. Around age 9, I was sold at a slave auction to John Neely for $100 along with a flock of sheep. I vividly remember John Neely as a harsh and violent slave master. Around 1815, I fell in love with a slave named Robert from a farm nearby. We had a daughter, Diana. Robert's owner disapproved of the relationship since Diana and any subsequent children produced by the union would be the property of John Dumont, my master. We never saw each other again. At 18, I was forced by Dumont to marry a slave named Thomas. The union resulted in a son, Peter, and 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Sophia. The state of New York had begun to negotiate the abolition of slavery in 1799. It took over 2 decades for liberation to come for all slaves in the state. Dumont, my slave master, had promised to grant my freedom on July 4, 1826. When the date arrived, however, he had a change of heart and refused to let me go. I fled on foot with my infant daughter Sophia, leaving behind my other children who were legally bound to my master. We were taken in by Isaac and Maria Van Wegenen, who were abolitionists. When Dumont came to reclaim his property, the Van Wegenens offered to buy my services from him for $20, until the New York anti-slavery law emancipating all slaves took effect in 1827. Dumont agreed. After the New York anti-slavery law was passed, Dumont illegally sold my 5-year-old son Peter. With the help of the Van Wegenens, I filed a lawsuit to get him back. I won this case and regained custody of my son. I became the first black woman to sue a white man in a United States court and succeeded. After successfully rescuing my son Peter, we stayed together until 1839. At that time, Peter took a job on a whaling ship. I received 3 letters from my son between 1840 and 1841. When the ship returned to port in 1842, Peter was not on board. I never heard from my son again. The Van Wegenens had a profound impact on my spiritual life, and I became a fervent Christian. In 1843, I changed my name to Sojourner Truth and embarked on a journey not only to speak the truth, but also to proclaim the gospel and speak out against slavery and oppression. The following year, I joined forces with abolitionists Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison. In 1850, I published my memoirs, and in 1851, at the Ohio Women's Rights Convention, I spoke out about equal rights for black women in my speech, Ain't I a Woman?
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh,
Well, children, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that betwixt the Negroes of the South and women at the North all talking about rights, the white men will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped in the carriages and lifted over ditches and have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me in the carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns and no man can head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well, and ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children, and seen most all sold off to slavery, and when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me, and ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. What's it they call it? Intellect. That's it. What's that got to do with women's rights or Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours hold a quart, won't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? Then that man back there in the black, says that women can't have as much rights as men, cause Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and the woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn this world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to put it back and get it right side up again. And now, they is asking you to do it. The men better let them. Obliged to you for hearing me. And now, old Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say. My passion gained the attention of President Abraham Lincoln, who invited me to the White House in October 1864. He showed me a Bible given to him, and I shared my memories of being a slave. He even gave me permission to be a counselor at Freedman's Village. While in Washington, I put my courage and disdain for segregation on display by riding on whites-only streetcars. When the Civil War ended, I worked feverishly to find jobs for freed blacks who were in poverty. Sojourner Truth continued to speak out against discrimination and in favor of women's suffrage, and agitated for black people to be able to fight for their own freedom until her death in November 26, 1883, leaving behind a legacy of courage, faith, and fighting for what's right and honorable. This unschooled woman escaped a miserable life of servitude, rape, and abuse to being hailed an African American abolitionist, civil rights activist, evangelist, and author. In 2009, a statue of Sojourner Truth was unveiled in the U.S. Capitol, commemorating her legacy.
oh, freedom. Oh,